Good morrow, scholars. Welcome back to Star Wars Return of the Jedi. We are on Chapter 1, page 477. So I think this chapter is about 19 pages long. Hopefully it'll be about half as long as my my New Moon video that I uploaded just a little bit ago. Outside the small adobe hut, the sandstorm wailed like a beast in agony, refusing to die. Inside, the sounds were muted. It was cooler in this shelter, more hushed and darker, while the beast outside howled. In this place of nuance and shadow, a shrouded figure worked. Tanned hands holding arcane tools extended from the sleeves of a kaftan-like robe. The figure crouched on the ground, working. Before him lay a discoid, a device of a strange design, wires trailing from it at one end, symbols etched into its flat surface. He connected the wired end to the tubular smooth handle, pulled through an organic-looking connector, locked it in place with another tool. He motioned to a shadow in the corner. The shadow moved toward him. Tentatively, the obscure form rolled closer to the robed figure. Tweet? I don't know. Sorry. The little R2 unit questioned timidly as it approached, pausing when it was just a foot from the shrouded man with the strange device. The shrouded man motioned the droid nearer still. R2-D2 scooted the last distance, blinking, and the hands raised toward his domed little head. The fine sand blew hard over the dunes of Tatooine. The wind seemed to come from everywhere at once, typhooning in spots, swirling in devil winds here, hovering in stillness there, without pattern or meaning. A road wound across the desert plain. Its nature changed constantly. At one moment, obscured by drifts of ochre sand, the next moment swept clean or distorted by the heat of the simmering air above it. A road more ephemeral than navigable, yet a road to be followed all the same, for it was the only way to reach the palace of Jabba the Hutt. Jabba was the vilest gangster in the galaxy. He had his fingers in smuggling, slave trading, murder, his minions scattered across the stars. He both collected and invented atrocities, and his court was a den of unparalleled decay. It was said by some that Jabba had chosen Tatooine as his place of residence because only in this arid crucible of a planet could he hope to keep his soul from rotting away altogether. Here the parched sun might bake his humor into a festering brine. In any case, it was the place few of kind spirit even knew of, let alone approached. It was a place of evil, where even the most courageous felt their powers wilt under the foul gaze of Jabba's corruption. I wonder why R2's sound effects are now being written. I guess it's because James Caan feels like it. R2-D2 vocalized going... Poot, tweet, beep, don't beep. I don't know where that came from, but yeah. Of course I'm worried, C-3PO fussed. And you should be too. Poor Lando Calrissian never returned from this place. Can you imagine what they've done to him? R2 whistled timidly. The golden droid waded stiffly through the shifting sandhill and stopped short as Jabba's palace suddenly loomed dark. Suddenly, twice, immediately, never mind. In the near distance, R2 almost bumped into him, quickly skidding to the side of the road. Watch where you're going, R2. C-3PO resumed walking, but more slowly, his little friend rolling along at his side. As they went, he chattered on, why couldn't Chewbacca have delivered this message? No. Whenever there's an impossible mission, they turn to us. No one worries about the droid. Sometimes I wonder why we put up with it all. On and on he rambled over the desolate final stretch of road until at last they reached the gates to the palace, massive iron doors taller than 3PO could see, a part of a series of stone and iron walls forming several gigantic cylindrical towers that seemed to rise out of a mountain of packed sand. The two droids fearfully looked around the ominous door for signs of life or welcome, or some sort of signaling device with which to make their presence known. Seeing nothing of any of those categories, C-3PO mustered his resolve, which function had been programmed into him quite a long time earlier, knocked softly 3 times on the thick metal gate, then quickly turned around and announced to R2, there doesn't seem to be anyone here. Let's go back and tell Master Luke. Suddenly, a small hatch opened in the center of the door. A spindly mechanical arm popped out, affixed to which a large electronic eyeball peered unabashedly at the two droids. The eyeball spoke. Ti tuta hat yud. 3PO stood erect, proud through his circuits, though his circuits quivered a bit. He faced the eye, pointed to R2, and then to himself. R2D2 bo C3PO sha I tuta ad mishka Jabba the Hutt. How did I do? The eye looked quickly from one robot to the other, then retracted back through the little window and slammed the hatch shut. R2 whispered with concern. I don't feel like reading his... Never mind, shut up. 3PO nodded. I don't think they're going to let us in, R2. We'd better go. He turned to leave as R2 beeped a reluctant foretone. At that, a horrific grinding screech erupted. The massive iron doors slowly began to rise. The two droids looked at each other skeptically, and then into the yawning black cavity that faced them. They waited, afraid to enter, afraid to retreat. From the shadows, the strange voice of the eye screamed at them, Nud-cha! R2 beeped and rolled forward into the gloom. 3PO hesitated, then rushed after his stubby companion with a start. R2, wait for me! They stopped together in the gaping passageway as 3PO scolded, You'll get lost! The great door slammed shut behind them with a monumental crash that echoed through the dark cavern. For a moment, the two frightened robots stood there without moving. Then, haltingly, they stepped forward. They were immediately joined by three large Gamorrean guards, powerful pig-like brutes whose racial hatred of robots was well known. The guards ushered the two droids down the dark corridor without so much as a nod. When they reached the first half-lit hallway, one of them grunted an order. R2 beeped a nervous query at 3PO. You don't want to know, the golden droid responded apprehensively. Just deliver Master Luke's message and get us out of here quick. Before they could take another step, a form approached them from the obscurity of the cross corridor. Beeb Fortuna, the inelegant major domo of Jabba's degenerate court. He was a tall humanoid creature with eyes that saw only what was necessary and a robe that hid all. Protruding from the back of his skull were two fat, tentacular appendages that exhibited prehensile, sensual, and cognitive functions at various times, which he wore either draped over his shoulders for decorative effect, or, when the situation called for balance, hanging straight down behind him as if they were twin tails. He smiled thinly as he stopped before the two robots. Daiwana Wanga. I don't know. C-3PO spoke up officially. Daiwana Wanga, we bring a message to your master, Jabba the Hutt. R2 beeped a postscript, upon which 3PO nodded and added, and a gift. He thought about this a moment, looked as puzzled as it was possible for a droid to look, and whispered loudly to R2, Gift? What gift? Bib shook his head emphatically. Ni Jabba no bara mi shade su gudi. He held out his hand toward R2. The small droid backed up meekly, but his protest was lengthy. R2, give it to him, 3PO insisted. Sometimes R2 could be so binary. At this, though, R2 became positively defiant, beeping and tooting at Fortuna and 3PO as if they'd both had their programs erased. 3PO nodded finally, hardly happy with R2's answer. He smiled apologetically at Bib. He says our master's instructions are to give it only to Jabba himself. Bib considered the problem at a moment, as 3PO went on explaining, I'm terribly sorry. I'm afraid he's ever so stubborn about these things. He managed to throw a disparaging yet loving tone into his voice as he tilted his head toward his small associate. Bib gestured for them to follow. Nudcha. He walked back into the darkness, the droids following close behind, the three Gamorrean guards lumbering along at the rear. As C-3PO descended into the belly of the shadow, he muttered quietly to the silent R2 unit, R2, I have a bad feeling about this. C-3PO and R2-D2 stood at the entrance of the throne room looking in. We're doomed, whimpered 3PO, wishing for the 1000th time he could close his eyes. The room was filled wall to cavernous wall with the animate dregs of the universe. grotesque creatures from the lowest star systems, drunk on spiced liquor and their own fetid vapors. Ah, Gamorreans, twisted humans, Jawas, all reveling in base pleasures or raucously comparing mean feats. And in front of the room, reclining on a dais that overlooked the debauchery, was Jabba the Hutt. His head was 3 times human size, perhaps 4. His eyes were yellow, reptilian. His skin was like a snake's as well, except covered with a fine layer of grease. He had no neck, but only a series of chins that expanded finally into a great bloated body, engorged it to bursting with stolen morsels. Stunted, almost useless arms sprouted from his upper torso. The sticky fingers of his left hand languidly wrapped around the smoking end of his water pipe. He had no hair. It had fallen out from a combination of diseases. He had no legs. His trunk simply tapered gradually to a long, plump snake tail that stretched along the length of the platform like a tube of yeasty dough. I mean, I've seen Jabba the Hutt, but, reading a description makes it worse. His lipless mouth was wide, almost ear to ear, and he drooled continuously. It sounds like Bronte. Chained to him, or me, you've seen how much I drool. Well, I don't drool, but I have overproductive saliva glands. Chained to him, chained at the neck, was a sad, pretty dancing girl, a member of Fortuna species, with 2 dry, shapely tentacles sprouting from the back of her head, hanging suggestively down her bare, muscled back. Her name was Ula. Looking forlorn, she sat as far away as her chain would allow, at the other end of the dais. And sitting near Jabba's belly was a small monkey-like reptile named Salicious Crumb, who caught all of the food and ooze that spilled out of Jabba's hands or mouth and ate it with a nauseating cackle. Eee. You remember the thing. Shafts of light from above partially illuminated the drunken courtiers as Bib Fortuna crossed the floor to the dais. The room was composed of an endless series of alcoves within alcoves. So much of what went on was, in any case, visible only as shadow and movement. When Fortuna reached the throne, he delicately leaned forward and whispered into the slobbering monarch's ear. Jabba's eyes became slits. Then, with a maniacal laugh, he motioned for the 2 terrified droids to be brought in. "Boshuda," wheezed the Hutt, and lapsed into a fit of coughing. I just did that. Although he understood several languages, as a point of honor, he only spoke Huttese, his only such point. The quaking robot scooted forward to stand before the repulsive ruler, though he grossly violated their most deeply programmed sensibilities. "The message, R2, the message," 3PO urged. R2 whistled once, and a beam of light projected from his domed head, creating a hologram of Luke Skywalker that stood before them on the floor. Quickly, the image grew to over 10 feet tall, until the young Jedi warrior towered over the assembled throng, there we go. All at once, the room grew quiet as Luke's giant presence made itself felt. "Greetings, exalted one," the hologram said to Jabba. "Allow me to introduce myself. I am Luke Skywalker, Jedi Knight, and friend of Captain Solo. I seek an audience with your greatness to bargain for his life." At this, the entire room burst into laughter, which Jabba instantly stopped with a hand motion. Luke didn't pause long. "I know that you are powerful, mighty Jabba, and that your anger with Solo must be equally powerful, but I am sure we can work out an arrangement which will be mutually beneficial. As a token of my goodwill, I present you a gift, these 2 droids." 3PO jumped back, as if stung. What? What did he say?" Luke continued, "Both are hard-working and will serve you well." With that, the hologram disappeared. 3PO wagged his head in despair. "Oh no, this can't be. R2, you must have played the wrong message." Jabba laughed and drooled. Bib spoke in Huttese. "Bargain rather than fight. He is no Jedi." Jabba nodded in agreement. Still grinning, he rasped at 3PO. "There will be no bargain. I have no intention of giving up my favorite decoration." With a hideous chuckle, he looked toward the dimly lit alcove beside the throne. There, hanging flat against the wall, was the carbonized form of Han Solo, his face and hands emerging out of the cold, hard slab, like a statue reaching from a sea of stone. R2 and 3PO marched dismally through the dank passageway at the prodding of the Gamorrean guard. Dungeon cells lined both walls. The unspeakable cries of anguish that emanated from within as the droids passed echoed off the stone and down the endless catacombs. Periodically, a hand or claw or tentacle would reach through the bars of a door to grab at the hapless robots. R2 beeped pitifully. 3PO only shook his head. What could have possibly come over Master Luke? Was it something I did? He never expressed any unhappiness with my work. My chest hurts. They approached a door at the end of the corridor. It slid open automatically, and the Gamorrean shoved them forward. Inside, their ears were assaulted by the deafening machine sounds. Wheels creaking, piston heads slamming, water hammers, engine hums, and a continuously shifting haze of steam made visibility short. This was either the boiler room or programmed hell. An agonized electronic scream, like the sound of stripping gears, drew their attention to the corner of the room. From out of the mist walked EV-99, a thin human-like robot with some disturbingly human appetites. In the dimness behind 99... Oh, I get it. 3PO could see the legs being pulled off of a droid on a torture rack, while the second droid, hanging upside down, was having red-hot irons applied to its feet. It had emitted the electronic scream 3PO had heard a few moments earlier, as the sensor circuits in its metal skin melted in agony. 3PO cringed at the sound, his own wiring sympathetically crackling with static electricity. 99 stopped in front of 3PO, raising her pincer hands expansively. "Ah, new acquisitions," she said with great satisfaction. "I am EV-99, Chief of Cyborg Operations. You are a protocol droid, aren't you?" "I am C-3PO, human cyborg..." "Yes or no will do," 99 said icily. "Well, yes," 3PO replied. This robot was going to be trouble, that much was obvious. One of those droids who always had to prove she was more droid than thou. Ha 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 ha. "How many languages do you speak?" 99 continued. "Well, two can play at that game," thought 3PO. He ran his most dignified official introductory tape. "I am fluent in over 6 million forms of communication and can..." "Splendid," 99 interrupted gleefully. "We have been without an interpreter since the Master got angry with something our last protocol droid said and disintegrated him." "Disintegrated?" 3PO wailed. Any semblance of protocol left him. 99 spoke to the pig guard, who suddenly appeared. "This one will be quite useful. Fit him with a restraining bolt, then take him back up to the main audience chamber." The guard grunted and roughly shoved 3PO toward the door. "R2, don't leave me," 3PO called out, but the guard grabbed him and pulled him away, and he was gone. R2 let out a long, plaintive cry as 3PO was removed. Then he turned to 99 and beeped in outrage, and at length 99 laughed. "You're a feisty little one, but you'll soon learn some respect, loon. I have need for you on the Master Sail Barge. Several of our Astro droids have been disappearing recently, stolen for spare parts, most likely. I think you'll fit in nicely." The droid on the torture rack emitted a high-frequency wail, then sparked briefly and was silent. Aww. The court of Jabba the Hutt rolled in malignant ecstasy. Ooh la, the beautiful creature chained to Jabba danced in the center of the floor. Why is my back so itchy? Where was I? The inebriated monsters cheered and heckled. 3PO hovered warily near the back of the throne, trying to keep the lowest profile possible. Periodically, he had to duck to avoid a fruit hurled in his direction or to sidestep a rolling body. Mostly he just laid low. What else was the protocol droid to do in a place of so little protocol? Jabba leered through the smoke of his hookah and beckoned the creature Ula to come sit beside him. She stopped dancing instantly, a fearful look in her eye, and backed up, shaking her head. Apparently she had suffered such invitations before. Jabba became angry. He pointed unmistakably to a spot beside him on the dais. "Da Etha," he growled. Ula shook her head more violently, her face a mask of terror. "Na Chuba Negatori? I don't know. Na Tuta." Jabba became livid. Furiously he motioned to Ula. "Bosca." I don't know. "I'm doing the best I can." Jabba pushed a button as he released Ula's chain. Before she could flee, a grating trapdoor in the floor dropped open and she tumbled into the pit below. The door snapped shut instantly, A moment of silence followed by a low rumbling roar, followed by a terrified shriek, was followed once more by silence. Jabba laughed until he slobbered. A dozen revelers hurried over to peer through the grate to observe the demise of the nubile dancer. That's so sad. 3PO shrank even lower and looked for support to the carbonite form of Han Solo, suspended in a bas relief above the floor. Now there was a human without a sense of protocol, he thought wistfully. His reverie was interrupted by an unnatural quiet that suddenly fell over the room. He looked up to see Bib Fortuna making his way through the crowd, accompanied by 2 Gamorrean guards, and followed by a fierce-looking, cloaked, helmeted bounty hunter, who led his captive prize on a leash, Chewbacca the Wookiee. 3PO gasped, stunned. "Oh no, Chewbacca! No!" "I love Chewbacca, you remember." Bib muttered a few words into Jabba's ear, pointing to the bounty hunter and his captive. Jabba listened intently. The bounty hunter was humanoid, small and mean. A belt of cartridges was slung across his jerkin, and an eye slit in his helmet mask gave the impression of his being able to see through things. He bowed low, then spoke in fluent Ubays. "Greetings, majestic one. I am Bosch." It was a metallic language, well adapted to the rarefied atmosphere of the home planet from which this nomadic species arose. Jabba answered in the same tongue, though his Ubays was stilted and slow. "At last someone has brought me the mighty Chewbacca." He tried to continue, but started on the word he wanted. With a roaring laugh, he turned toward 3PO. "Where's my talk droid?" he boomed, motioning 3PO to come closer. Reluctantly, the courtly robot obeyed. Jabba ordered him congenially, "Welcome our mercenary friend and ask his price for the Wookiee." 3PO translated the message to the bounty hunter. Bosch listened carefully, simultaneously studying the feral creatures around the room, possible exits, possible hostages, vulnerable points. He particularly noticed Boba Fett standing near the door, the steel-masked mercenary who had caught Han Solo. Bosch assessed this all in a moment, then spoke evenly in his native tongue to 3PO. "I will take 50,000, no less." 3PO quietly translated for Jabba, who immediately became enraged and knocked the golden droid off the raised throne with a sweep of his massive tail. 3PO clattered in a heap on the floor, where he rested momentarily, uncertain of the correct protocol in this situation. Jabba raved on in guttural Huttese. Bosch shifted his weapon to a more usable position. 3PO sighed, struggled back onto the throne, composed himself, and translated for Bosch, loosely, what Jabba was saying. 25,000 is all he'll pay, 3PO instructed. Jabba motioned his pig guards to take Chewbacca as the 2 Jawas covered Bosch. Boba Fett also raised his weapon. Jabba added to 3PO's translation. 25,000 plus his life. 3PO translated. The room was silent, tense, uncertain. Finally, Bosch spoke softly to 3PO. "Tell that swollen garbage bag he'll have to do better than that, or they'll be picking his smelly hide out of every crack in this room. I'm holding a thermal detonator." 3PO suddenly focused on the small silver ball Bosch held, partially concealed in his left hand. It could be heard humming, a quiet, ominous hum. 3PO looked nervously at Jabba, then back at Bosch. Jabba barked at the droid. "Well, what did he say?" 3PO cleared his throat. "Your greatness, he... Out with it, droid," Jabba roared. "Oh dear." 3PO fretted. He inwardly prepared himself for the worst when Bosch spoke to Jabba in flawless Huttese. "Wait, what?" Then he spoke to Jabba. "Oh, I'm confused. Bosch respectfully disagrees with your exaltedness and begs you to reconsider the amount, or he'll release the thermal detonator he is holding." Instantly, a disturbed murmuring, "Dang it!" circled in the room. Everyone backed up several feet as if that would help. Jabba stared at the ball clenched in the bounty hunter's hand. It was beginning to glow. Another tense hush came over the onlookers. Jabba stared malevolently at the bounty hunter for several long seconds. Then slowly a satisfied grin crept over his vast, ugly mouth. From the bilious pit of his belly, a laugh rose like gas in a mire. "Ooh, ooh, 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 ooh. Ooh, 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 ooh." I feel like I could have done that a deeper pitch. Oh well. "This bounty hunter is my kind of scum, fearless and inventive. Tell him 35, no more, and warn him not to press his luck." 3PO felt greatly relieved by this turn of events. He translated for Bosch. Everyone studied the bounty hunter closely for his reactions. Guns were readied. Then Bosch released a switch on the thermal detonator, and it went dead. Zivos, he nodded. He agrees, the 3PO said to Jabba. The crowd cheered. Jabba relaxed. Come, my friend, join in our celebration. I may find other work for you. 3PO translated as the party resumed its depraved revelry. Chewbacca growled under his breath as he was led away by the Gamorreans. He might have cracked their heads just for being so ugly, or to remind everyone present what a Wookiee was made of, but near the door he spotted a familiar face. Hidden behind a half-mask of pit-boar teeth was a human in the uniform of a skiff guard, Lando Calrissian. Chewbacca gave no sign of recognition, nor did he resist the guard who now escorted him from the room. Lando had managed to infiltrate this nest of maggots months earlier to see if it was possible to free Solo from Jabba's imprisonment. He'd done this for several reasons. Wow, this has also been a long chapter. Although I think that's just because I'm reading so slow, because I read for so long in the last one. My throat's kind of hoarse right now. First, because he felt correctly that it was his fault. Han was in this predicament and wanted to make amends, provided, of course, he could do so without getting hurt. Blending in here, just one of the pirates, was no problem for Lando, though. Mistaken identity was a way of life with him. Second, he wanted to join forces with Han's buddies at the top of the Rebel Alliance. They were out to beat the Empire, and he wanted nothing more in his life now than to do just that. The Imperial police had moved in on his action once too often, so this was a grudge match now. Besides, Lando liked being a part of Solo's crowd, since they seemed to be right up at the business end of all the action against the Empire. Third, Princess Leia had asked him to help, and he just never could refuse a princess asking for help. Besides, you never know how she might thank you someday. Well, maybe he wants some money. Finally, Lando would have bet anything that Han simply could not be rescued from this place, and Lando just plain couldn't resist a bet. Hang on one second. Sorry, I just want to make sure my phone bill was paid. Where was I? Dang it. So he spent his days watching a lot, watching and calculating. That's what he did now. As Chewie was led away, he watched, and then he faded into the stonework. The band started playing, led by a blue flop-eared jazz wailer named Max Reba. Dancers flooded the floor, the courtiers hooted and brewed their brains a bit more. Bosch leaned against a column, surveying the scene. His gaze swept coolly over the court, taking in the dancers, the smokers, the rollers, the gamblers, until it came to rest squarely on an equally unflappable stare from across the room. Boba Fett was watching him. Bosch shifted slightly, posturing with his weapon, cradled like a loving child. Boba Fett remained motionless, an arrogant sneer all but visible behind his ominous mask. Pig guards led Chewbacca through the unlit dungeon corridor. A tentacle coiled out of one of the doors to touch the brooding Wookiee. He screamed, and the tentacle monster shot back into its cell. The next door was opened. Before Chewie fully realized what was happening, he was hurled forcefully into the cell by all of the guards. The door slammed shut, locking him in darkness. He raised his head and let out a long, pitiful howl that carried through the entire mountain of iron and sand, up into the infinitely patient sky. The throne room was quiet, dark, and empty as night filled its littered corners. Blood, wine, and saliva stained the floor. Shreds of tattered clothing hung from the fixtures. Unconscious bodies curled under broken furniture. The party was over. A dark figure moved silently among the shadows, pausing behind a column here, a statue there. He made his way stealthily along the perimeter of the room, stepping once over a snoring yak face. What? He never made a sound. This was Bosch, the bounty hunter. He reached the curtained alcove beside which the slab that was Han Solo hung suspended by a force field on the wall. Bosch looked around furtively, and then flipped a switch near the side of the carbonite coffin. The humming of the force field wound down, and the heavy monolith slowly lowered to the floor. Bosch stepped up and studied the frozen face of the space pirate. He touched Solo's carbonized cheek curiously as if it were a rare precious stone, cold and hard as diamond. For a few seconds he examined the controls at the side of the slab, then activated a series of switches. Finally, after one last hesitant glance at the living statue before him, he slid the decarbonizing lever into place. The casing began to emit a high-pitched sound. Anxiously, Bush peered all around again, making certain no one heard. Slowly, the hard shell that was covering the contours of Solo's face started to melt away. Soon the coating was gone from the entire front of Solo's body, freeing his upraised hands, so long frozen in protest, to fall slackly to his sides. His face relaxed into what looked like nothing so much as a death mask. Bosch retracted the lifeless body from its casing and lowered it gently to the floor. He leaned his gruesome helmet close to Solo's face, listening closely for signs of life. No breath, no pulse. With a start, Han Solo's eyes suddenly snapped open, and he began to cough. Bush steadied him, tried to quiet him. There were still guards who might hear. "Quiet," he whispered. "Just relax." Han squinted up at the dim form above him. "I can't see what's happening." He was understandably disoriented after having been suspended in animation. Suspended animation, there we go, for 6 of this desert planet's months, a period that was to him timeless. It had been a grim sensation, as if for an eternity he'd been trying to draw breath, to move, to scream, every moment in conscious, painful asphyxiation. And now suddenly he was dumped into a loud black cold pit. His senses assaulted him all at once. The air bit at his skin with 1,000 icy teeth. The opacity of his sight was impenetrable. Wind seemed to rush around his ears at hurricane volumes. He couldn't feel which way was up. The myriad of smells filling his nose made him nauseous. He couldn't stop salivating. All his bones hurt. And then came the visions. Visions from his childhood, from his last breakfast, 27 piracies, as if all the images and memories of his life had been crammed into a balloon, and the balloon popped and they all came bursting out now, randomly in a single moment. It was nearly overwhelming. It was sensory overload, or more precisely, memory overload. Man had gone mad in these first minutes of following decarbonization, hopelessly, utterly mad, unable to ever again reorganize the 10 billion individual images that comprised the lifespan into any kind of coherent selective order. Solo wasn't that susceptible. He rode the surge of the tide of impressions until it settled down into a churning backwash, submerging the bulk of his memories, leaving only the most recent flotsam to foam on the surface. His betrayal by Lando Calrissian, whom he'd once called a friend, his ailing ship, his last view of Leia, his capture by Boba Fett, the iron-masked bounty hunter who... Where was he now? What had happened? His last image was of Boba Fett watching him turn into carbonite. Was this Boba Fett again now, come to thaw him for more abuse? The air roared in his ears. His breathing felt irregular, unnatural. He batted his hand in front of his face. Bush tried to reassure him. "You're free of the carbonite and have hibernation sickness. Your eyesight will return in time. Come, we must hurry if we are to leave this place." Reflexively, Han grabbed the bounty hunter, felt at the grated face mask, and drew back. "I'm not going anywhere. I don't even know where I am." He began sweating profusely as his heart once again churned blood and his mind groped for answers. "Who are you, anyway?" he demanded suspiciously. Perhaps it was Fett, after all. The bounty hunter reached up and pulled the helmet away from his head, revealing underneath the beautiful face of Princess Leia. "Who saw that coming?" The bounty hunter reached... Oh, wait, no, I already read that. "One who loves you," she whispered, taking his face tenderly in her still gloved hands and kissing him long on the lips. Well, that was kind of awkward. Hopefully all this speaking will help me with everything. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know, like I said in the last video, if you'd like me to go back and read Twilight, the original Twilight, that is, instead of New Moon, and I will do my best to accommodate you guys. But honestly, I think I really would like to just start with New Moon and show you guys my descent into Twilight. That is to say, the series, not so much the book. I don't know. Anyway, until next time, goodbye everybody.